think that the biggest takeaway for me is to say that this isn't about being Republican. This isn't about being Democrat. This is about political violence in this country and why it's so prevalent here. That's a problem. And I don't know how we screen for it. I don't know how you can't really necessarily see hate in someone's heart. And so we have a bigger conversation to have here, because this is a man, whether you agreed with him or not, or vehemently disagreed with him, this is a husband, a father, someone's son. And I just think that we have lost sight of really our humanity when it comes to our political discourse in this country, whether it was from Gabby Giffords to Steve Scalise to what happened in Minnesota, to the president himself, and to watch this now. And for anyone who's been on social media and those videos are playing, whether you wanted to see it or not, it is truly, I mean, I'm sitting here, I'm sure you're all feeling the same, but sick to my stomach about what this means, but also just seeing it. But we have to get a handle on it, and I don't know what that answer is, but it's not Republican or Democrat. It is us as Americans, and we have a problem here.
Kristen, just weigh in, your immediate reaction.
I mean, obviously, I totally agree. This is not a one-party problem or the other, as we've clearly seen throughout the years. And, you know, I was on Capitol Hill working for the Blue Dog Coalition, of which Congresswoman Giffords was a member. And, you know, you're a communications person trying to write statements. I remember just breaking down crying and then trying to gather myself and pull myself together. I think an element, you know, it's hard to figure out exactly how to get at this, but an element is the rhetoric that's coming out of, you know, both sides of the aisle sometimes, and toning that down, treating people like humans, and your leaders. And the president starts with the president of the United States. People listen to what he's saying, and you know, I mean, and members of Congress and members of the Senate, and having an honest dialogue that's civil with, you know, your next door neighbor, I think, you know, is really important. I don't think that maybe fixes everything, because like you said, you can't see hate in somebody's heart. You can't necessarily tell what they're going to do. But, you know, it can definitely start there.
You know, Maura reminds us of the Steve Scalise shooting that was years ago. The Capitol Police shooting was, what, 1999? This has been a conversation in Washington for years, and whether we should provide more security for lawmakers who in many cases are dipping into allowances to find private security and protection for themselves. You worked for a former speaker in John Boehner. Maura, does that need to happen?
You know, I think it's a conversation to be had about how much members make currently. You know, I know that that's not necessarily a popular conversation, but when you look at their salary, if they are, you know, in a situation where they need to get security, their salary is not really going to cover that, plus their housing here in D.C. So you think about that, that may be a conversation to have, some built-in funding for security needs. But I think with Kristen's point there about talking and how we use our words, referring to our political opponents as enemies, that's a problem, right? We can do better. And I think that for every member of Congress, anyone who's running for office, and anyone who sits, you know, talking on politics on TV should try and do better and make a promise to try and do that, because I think that our words have impact, and how we talk to one another as a Republican talking to a Democrat and be on a panel together. That makes, I do think that people at home watch that, and how we handle our discourse here really could make an impact at home.
Well, stack strategies. Maura, he sounded a lot like you just now, didn't he?
He did. And I was honestly really, really pleased to hear the tone that he took, but also to remind people what happens behind closed doors. As you mentioned, working in the Capitol and seeing members, yes, they'll be at their podiums and debating a bill, but then they'll walk up the aisle of the House floor or the Senate floor and say, you know, how'd you shoot this weekend on your round of golf? And they'll have conversations like human beings. And I think that in this moment, Senator Rounds pointed out that he wanted more people to know about that. And we should have more people know about that. They should know that the members themselves don't hate each other. They just disagree. But as my old boss, John Boehner, would say, you can disagree without being disagreeable. And his door was always open. And it was one of my favorite things about it was seeing members who would come back just to have talk with him, maybe smoke a cigarette. But, you know, they
never saw that.
Never saw that, but rumors. But it just, this idea that we can disagree without being disagreeable shouldn't be so foreign. It should be the norm. And I was really pleased to hear Senator Rounds reiterate that today.
This feels like a new level to go outside of official elected politics to attack a thinker who you don't agree with.
I do. I wonder what this, again, like I said before, you know, you can't necessarily see what's in someone's heart, so you don't know what's, you know, factors there. But what Charlie Kirk was doing, whether you agree with him or vehemently disagree with him, he was opening up conversation, welcomed debate, and welcomed different thinkers and different
Gavin
opinions.
Newsom had welcomed on his show.
That's right.
And exactly. And so...
And he was doing it on college campuses with young people.
On college campuses, getting young people to realize that this debating is a skill that we all should be, equipped to have, but should be open to listening to other people's opinions. How else can you decide how you feel about something if you're not willing to hear the other side? And I think I think it's why it's hitting even harder that whether you agree with him or not, he opened up conversation and allowed for conversation and welcomed it. And to your question about what does this mean for people who are having speeches or just going to talk to college campuses, what is the security level going to be like now? And what does that mean for us as Americans? The land of the free, now we have barriers to that because people are going to be afraid.
Democrats. Do you take him at his word there? Is there any chance this could move? And is there another issue lawmakers can find common ground on?
They've got to find something because while Democrats can certainly play, okay, we're going to go into a shutdown, there has to be a plan to get out of it. And without a plan, the blame will go to them after a certain amount of time. If they just go into the shutdown without a plan, that's a problem. So there needs to be some sort of a conversation that's happening where they feel as though they could work on finding a common ground with Thune and with Senate Republicans. If it's not the Obamacare credits, then they have to find something else. But Republicans also can't be naive enough to think that they can have everything they want, and Democrats will just simply jump on board and play along. There has to be, again, negotiations, conversations, and a willingness to concede on some issue. I think that Mike Johnson has to have an honest conversation with his members and with their supporters, right? They need to understand that just because, as Kristen pointed out, we have all three branches. We have all the power of Congress and the president, but we still need Democrats' votes. So we still need Democrat votes. And that's why we need to compromise and find common ground and get something that can actually pass, because we do need some Democrats on board. So I think it's important to remember and also to remind our constituents that just because we have all the power doesn't mean we can get everything we want done without any input from the Democrats. That's just not how this works. So I think it's a little civics-friendly reminder. It would be helpful.
I appreciate that always. Little schoolhouse rock.
Yes.
Maura, what happened to the narrative that the Republicans actually want to shut down the government?
That narrative, what are you talking about?
Republicans or the White House?
We never want to shut down.
Doesn't Russ Vought want to shut down the government?
I mean, I do think that the president enjoys the idea of shut down, and then shifting the blame to Democrats. It's a winning message in his view. But again, back to this idea of having civil discourse and understanding how government works, it's very important to remind constituents that in order to get something done, you have to have buy-in from the other side. Our founding fathers did not design our system of government so that one party could just have their way all the time. That's just not how it was created. And so it's very, again, it just feels very elementary, but it does bear repeating that this is how this needs to work through conversation, through negotiation, and honest brokers.
Maura, does the president need to speak tomorrow? We have about a minute left.
I would hope that he sets the tone for this dial down of the temperature, yes, but also in how we talk about one another. Not only how we talk to one another, but how we talk about one another, especially those we disagree with. But presumably if he was attacked because of his views, that is a problem. For anyone who goes on and talks about how they feel about something, that's a problem. And I'll just speak to camera very quickly. If you're somebody who's going on social media to share hate and to threaten somebody because you don't like their views, really take a look and think about what you're doing. Think about your families, your children, your neighbors, your loved ones.
Thank you, Maura. Maura Gillespie, Kristen Hahn, you've both been great. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.